Good afternoon. I'm Another View producer, Lisa Godley, sitting in for Barbara Ham-Lee. A lot has happened in the country this week that is forcing us to take a long, hard look at race relations in America. Just last night, 5 Dallas police officers were killed in an ambush following a peaceful rally designed to protest the police shooting deaths of 2 African-American men. The Another View Roundtable is here to offer insight and share their perspectives on the tragedies in Dallas, in Minnesota, and in Louisiana. Another View is next, right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Another View producer, Lisa Godley, filling in for Barbara Ham-Lee. So much tragedy making national news headlines in such a short amount of time. Just last night, 5 Dallas police officers were killed and 7 others injured in a standoff where one of the suspects told police negotiators that he wanted to kill white people, especially white officers. All of this followed a peaceful rally to protest the shooting deaths of 2 African-American men by police, one in Louisiana and one in Minnesota, that occurred earlier this week. The country is in shock. People are hurting and people are on edge. Police officers are on edge, not knowing what to expect at any given time. And I know black men are on edge, especially when they get pulled over by police, because they don't know what's going to happen once they roll the window down. So, how are we going to go about fixing this? Well, the Another View Roundtable is here to offer insight. Joining me now, Hampton University political science professor Eric Claville. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Lisa.
All righty. Beside him, my buddy, community activist Bill Thomas. Bill, thank you for being here.
It's a blessing.
And from my alma mater, NSU political science professor Carol Pretlow. Carol, glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
And Virginia Pilot columnist Roger Chesley. Hello, Roger.
Hello, Lisa. Good to see you on this side of the glass this month.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And joining us by phone is author and talk show host Will Levis. Hi, Will.
Hey, pleasure. Wish I was there in studio with you all, especially you, Lisa.
Thank you. Okay, let's jump right in there. As I mentioned, police are on edge. Black men are on edge. The situation doesn't seem to be getting any better. So what do we do? Would you like to start?
Sure. Again, thank you so much for having this particular show, Race and Policing. What we've seen in the last several days, which has been tragic on both sides, is simply something that's been going on since Africans have been on this particular continent. More specifically, if you look at what's been taking place in neighborhoods, we've talked about this before. We've talked about the police being the military arm of white privilege and racism, keeping African Americans in place. Now, I will say, I'll give a disclaimer. We'll talk about the Baton Rouge shooting. I spent 18 years in Baton Rouge. I know exactly where that street is. I know that block. I canvassed that area as a community organizer. I passed through it just about every day going from the Southern University to my apartment. I know it very well. I know the culture. I know all the political operatives that are on that were standing on the governor's mansion steps. I know all that was on the city hall steps. Okay, so, it's a situation where African-American men and African Americans are not deemed to be fairly treated by the police, and it's a situation where they don't want African American men to comply. They want African American men to submit. Okay, and there is a difference. There's a conversation that my father had to have with me, that I have to have with my sons, that African Americans have to have with their children, that whites don't. And for white American white listeners that are listening, ask yourself, would this happen? Do you have to have a separate conversation with your kids when you're pulled over by the police? Why is it always that an African-American male, we thought he had a gun, and he actually did not, and these individuals are killed, or we thought that he was going to do X, Y, Z. And of course, we'll go further into various reports and so forth. But this is something that has been the case for years. I mean, Central Park 5, okay, in New York. The stop and frisk in New York. Over 700,000 reports of African American being stopped and frisked for pretty much no reason, just being black. And as the mother of the son said, my son was black in the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, how many times is that the story, of individuals? And I'll draw a very quick 15-second historical parallel. When you think about the 3 civil rights workers that were killed, okay, more specifically John Chaney. When Chaney was killed, that gentleman that gave the fiery speech at the funeral, okay, we're from the same city in Louisiana, born and raised. He's like, I'm sick and tired of our black men being killed by the police. When they found those 3 civil rights workers, that just wasn't a grave for them. That was a dumping grave, a dumping site, where the police, which coupled as the Klan, dumped black individuals when they killed them.
All right, Bill, you sitting there, you shaking your head. I'm gonna get to you in just a second, Roger.
Well, you go to Roger. I mean, I'm not on edge.
You're not on edge.
No.
When you get pulled over, you're cool with it.
Yes, put my hands on the wheel. I apply to what the officer says do, knowing that if I don't, that something could happen bad to me or something could happen good to me. There's good and bad people, black, white, all over the world.
Okay, that I agree with.
And so, things were 50 years ago haven't been improved. So I don't know what all these people are marching about. I mean, things are just as bad as they were. It's just as bad as you imagine. Sure, you have to have discipline and order and control. You have to understand where you are in your elements and what you're doing. That's just a matter of fact. I think some white and black parents give the kids the same lessons. If somebody of authority gives you an order, comply. Be respectful. And then you can take care of the business afterwards. That's what you do. But there's thousands upon thousands of African Americans that are doing just fine, don't live in these communities, have left, are doing great. And just to paint everything as all hell is broken loose, it's fine. There's some good police officers. There's some bad police officers. And I think that you have to really look and see where they are and then look at the experience of these police officers, Vietnam veterans, the war in the Middle East veterans. These guys, some have some issues, and they got to weed out the bad people. But everything is fine.
We're going to get back to how do we weed out the bad people. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but go ahead, Roger.
Doing fine, Paul. And where I'll disagree with you, Bill, is that, okay, I have a 26-year-old son. He's been brought up to be respectful. He's been brought up to do the right thing. He's been stopped by the police one time when he went over the speed limit in a school zone. And I went with him to court. The police officer in court said, oh, yes, he was very respectful. He did everything they were supposed to do. But are you going to get the police officer doing that all the time? Are each and every one of your nephews, cousins, friends going to have the same mentality when they're stopped by police? Is it going to be a police officer's bad day when he encounters your loved one? And then we all know that police officers rarely, first of all, are charged, and then even when charged, rarely are convicted. One of the big things that's different today is now we have all these videos out there that you can't deny what you see on those videos. The videos don't always tell the whole story, but they tell at least some of the story. And what they're showing is, hey, folks have been telling the truth about what happens in these encounters. When the man in Louisiana was killed, my goodness, he's on the ground. It looks like his arms are pinned. Well, why couldn't he be handcuffed? I wasn't there, and I didn't have, I don't know every detail. But my goodness, why was being shot seemed like the best way to resolve that situation? What is going on where we always seem to be the brunt of the violence in these situations? That is not to denigrate the many police officers that do a good job.
That's what you're doing.
We know that police know. You can say one thing if you only see it one way. If there's no sense of gray, then that's part of the problem. A lot of life is gray, and in a lot of these police encounters, there's some grayness in there. And I think if you reduce it to black and white, that's part of the problem. But there is something amiss when it appears that so many people are killed in these encounters with police.
Okay. Carol, I'm going to get to you in just a second because
Okay.
I really want you to share a story of mine, the story that you shared with me earlier. But I want Will to talk from another black male perspective as well as someone who has black sons. Bill, come on now.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I'm here. I'm listening to the discussion. I'm hearing, truth and everything that everybody has said. I mean, first I want to offer condolences to all of the families on both sides, including the police families down in Dallas as well. And you're right, Lisa. I'm somebody who grew up in inner city Brooklyn, who grew up feeling under occupied force of the cops. And then, ironically, I'm also someone who's a former reporter who covered cops when I was a reporter in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area of Arizona, and got an opportunity, as well as when I was a columnist at the Daily Press, got a lot of opportunity to interact with cops. And my perspective is definitely evolved. And, I'm not one who totally bashes cops at all. I'm one who recognizes that the majority of them are out there doing the jobs and doing them for the right reasons. But just as Eric pointed out, historically, what we're seeing now is the uprooting, is the unmasking of historically what has happened is that a lot of policemen were directly recruited to be occupying forces. You see that for example, in the history of LA's police department. They directly recruited from the Deep South back, in the 40s and the 30s, in the earlier times. People can look this up, and then you can go from city to city, Philadelphia, New York, Chicago, where police chiefs have had a mindset and a culture of we're going to occupy these black communities. And so what we're seeing is the results of that. A lot of that still goes on. But at the same time, you've got chiefs for example, in Virginia Beach, in Newport News, and Hampton, who get it, who are trying to recorrect and root out some of this mentality that exists, but it's going to take time. And it just as Roger pointed out, now that we have the videos to actually see what people have been talking about for generations, it hopefully will wake America up. And it's very important that a lot of white Americans, and not just, and really white Americans who are middle to upper middle class, because guess what? Poor whites know these stories as well. They know them too. But a lot of times in the media, they're not covered. They're marginalized and hidden as well. If you go in certain areas, in rural areas and certain urban areas where all whites are predominant, you're going to see some of the same types of behaviors. So what we're seeing is the importance of, as Bill shared with us, a link from a police officer. I put it on my Facebook page, a police officer out of Cleveland, who passionately said why she went into the business was to make a difference in her community, and that the racist cops need to be uprooted and taken out because they're making the problem worse. And that's a lot of what we're seeing.
I'm glad you brought that up, Will, because we do have some sound from her. I want to play that, and then I'm going to come back, and I want Carol to share a story, a personal story of hers from a perspective African-American female. But go ahead. Let's hear from the officer in Ohio.
We are running around killing each other left and right. But what hurts me the most is the people that stood in front of a judge and stood in front of a mayor and said, I swear my oath that I will serve and protect this community. My heart goes out to that young man's family, because if it was my son, I don't know what I would do. But to my brothers and sisters, my juvenile brothers and sisters, I am your keeper. Put them guns down, y'all. We killing each other. And the reason why all this racist stuff keeps going on is because we're divided. We're killing each other. We're not standing together. See, Martin Luther King them stood together. You didn't hear about a bunch of black people killing each other. We got to stand together, because a house divided against each other will not stand. And we got to be smart. Don't mean go tearing up stuff. Be smart. I am my brother and my sister's keeper. That's why I'm going to keep this uniform on. Because today I wanted to quit when I saw that video.
Okay. All righty. Carol, I want you to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that was intense. I agree with bits and pieces of everything that has been said. And I was especially mindful of the fact that, as you said, there are good and bad in all professions. But a few years ago, I was in the mall and I was having an asthma attack, and I think I may have shared this with you before. And I sat down, and obviously the inhaler wasn't doing well, so a police officer came to me, and he asked me, was I having a problem? Now, in my mind, all I could think of was, oh my God, a police officer, I'm scared. And I said, no, sir, I'm having an asthma attack, and I'll be okay. And he said, you want me to take you to the hospital? And I looked at him and I said, I don't think so, because in my mind I was like, I get in the car with you, I'll never be seen again. Now, it was nothing about his approach to me that was adversarial, but in my mind there were other situations that had been adversarial. So I said, no, thank you, I'll be okay. He said, well, what about this? I'm gonna call 911. And he did. And he said, would you get in? And they came and got me. And then he handed me his card. And he says, when you get ready to leave the hospital, call me. And I will see that you get back home. Well, I was embarrassed that based on my own prejudice, I had presented the shield against him. And sure enough, when I went to the hospital, I got taken care of. I called, and he says, well, I am going to send someone for you. They will have ID. They will pick you up. They will take you home. End of story. I felt bad because I had prejudged him. Perfect. But based on my experiences, and some of them had not been pleasant, here was my own bias.
I remember when Barbara and I first started the Race Let's Talk About It initiative, Alan Johnson, one of our guests who wrote a book about race and white privilege, said to us, he said, and this is a white male, he said, I don't know how black people do it. He said, you are constantly having to decide in your mind, you know, how somebody is perceiving you and how you're going to react to a situation based on that person's perception. He said, I couldn't live like that. He said, that would drive me crazy.
But I would say, Lisa, that I think a lot of African Americans, because of the numbers in this country, we have to do it every day. So, in a sense, we're the best teachers on this. My wife and I call her the boss, Michelle. We often have gone into restaurants and we'll kind of joke to each other as we're leaving. Well, that restaurant is segregated again because we were the only black couple in a particular restaurant, and this is often on trips when we go to different places. So in a big sense, we learn how to negotiate this, and I think especially the higher you go on the income level, you learn you have to do this. So we get this practice all the time. So sometimes other races don't, especially whites, they don't necessarily interact with blacks in the same way because they don't always have to bump up against them. We do, being in this country. And that does give us a certain level of expertise because we know we have to deal with others. Sometimes whites don't have to do that in the same way. And I think the more you bump up against people of other races, of other cultures, you have to see them as individuals and not as a mass. And the more you do that, I think the better it gets for everybody.
But I think the question becomes, and what Carol stated, this was my bias. But then she stated, from my previous experiences, okay? So the question becomes, why should we have to do this? Is it fair that we have to do this all the time, okay? And what we're seeing now is that white America is finally seeing, hey, you really weren't telling a lie. This really does happen. Those that actually do see it, okay? Now, there are some, I've talked with individuals from yesterday who've had to go to the office and, you know, of course, white individuals, they're interacting. They're only black in the office, of course. And they're like, well, you know, maybe he was going for a gun. I mean, I could see that, you know, so, you know, I don't have a problem with the police shooting it, you know, those type of comments. All right. And we've all endured those things. But what we're seeing now, I mean, I look at CNN and Fox News. Anytime a story comes up, I compare the two. Yesterday, it was all about Clinton emails on Fox News. All
Absolutely.
right? I mean, plastered. The killings in Minnesota and Baton Rouge were to the far right. It was like an afterthought. I mean, you had to scroll to find it, okay? On CNN, it was up front. Now, today, if you look at Fox News, it has the black male that was the suspected sniper in the Dallas police shootings, with his fist raised in a dashiki, okay, with big letters that says "cop wanted to kill white cops." All right, that is fear mongering right there. On the CNN page, you see officers consoling each other and things of that nature. I mean, so the question becomes, is the media stoking this as well? And yes, they are. It depends on what side you're leaning on. But again, we can't make America feel with these feel good stories. Oh, it was, we've all had good officers do good things. They're doing their job, okay? All right, but we can't make America feel comfortable. This is a wake up call, and if we do not answer this call, you're only going to see it get worse and worse and worse.
All right, and we have a lot of people who have a lot of things to say. Let's
just one thing.
take some calls here.
Just one thing, and go to calls, which is more important, I think. But I think we're naive as hell. Until we deal with our own situation in the black community, where over 265,000 African Americans have died. You don't want to hear that, but that's the fact.
Well, we know that's a problem, Bill. Nobody said that's not a problem.
And if you get your news from CNN and Fox News and not out talking to people and really feeling and getting things yourself, or telling people that are actually telling you what the news is, then everybody's naive. This stuff, that's a bunch of crap. Nobody cares what CNN said. They're selling business, no different than Fox News. The issue. I didn't interrupt you.
No,
the issue then. Please don't interrupt me. The issue becomes.
Hold on.
Then the issue becomes 5 African Americans were shot the last couple of weeks in Hampton Roads. There's no marching. There's no nothing. How about the black kids that don't get educated in public schools? Is that not something that's not normal? How about the parents that are not raising their kids correctly? I mean, there's a whole lot of issues out here. And to try to catapult all this stuff and try to blame some police officers that 99% are doing their jobs each and every day, black and white, on a couple of 3 or 4 that may not be doing it, I think is outrageous.
I don't think anybody's saying that those other things aren't issues and important
Yeah,
ones,
you are.
Bill.
And most that we've talked about before.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's say we have people that have been waiting for quite a while. Let's go to Tim in Virginia Beach. Tim, thank you for calling in.
Hey, I'm really so honored to listen to these gentlemen talking about this issue.
Young lady.
Young lady here.
In the way that they're talking about it, something has occurred to me, and it's not a politically correct thing. In the Hampton Roads area, several years ago, there was an order given to recruit veterans. These are people who have been in situations that are outrageous overseas. I'm wondering, these guys that you see on the videos, they resemble these people that I'm talking about. These a lot of them resemble veterans. How many? My question is, are any of these people actually veterans?
Are you talking about
Police officers. I think he's talking
about police officers?
Yes.
Veterans?
Okay.
Have they been subjected to? Have they been subjected to? The horrors of war? Are they?
Most have.
Has it been that great of an idea to recruit them?
Okay. Let's explore that a little bit, Tim. Thank you for calling. Okay. You did say something earlier, Bill, about
I think a large
veterans.
amount of the police officers, as in my family, were former military. And from the Vietnam War, where I'm experienced with, to these wars they have now with these ongoing tours of duties, 8 and 9 and 10, these guys are reflectively fighting wars on our streets in some of our communities. And there needs to be a lot of work done in the police department. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, and the caller brings up a very good point. we haven't, and he's right, it's not politically correct or politically expedient to say, oh, let's not recruit veterans all of a sudden because of issues with PTSD, being trained for war. I'm a veteran myself. We were trained to kill. Period. And that becomes an issue when you talk about, the war on the streets. And as Will Levis was saying, William H. Parker, these individuals that he recruited out in L.A. But there's another issue which deals with the education of police officers. If you look at the requirements to be a police officer, some of them are as low as GEDs and high school diplomas. We need to ask ourselves, should we raise those educational requirements to at least an associate's degree?
But part of the drawback, I just interject directly what you said, and the different police chiefs that I talked to in trying to get more Black and Latino and Asian officers on the department, if you raise those types of requirements, you don't necessarily have the pay to attract police officers for what is a dangerous and often thankless job. And that's the ongoing struggle for minority police officers and white officers as well. I'm sorry.
Carol, I'm going to let you go, and we're going to take a call up right after that. But let me just do this real quick. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about the recent shootings and the role of America's racial divide, the role that has played in all of this. And we're having this discussion with the Another View Roundtable. We'd love to hear from you. Please join the conversation. Give us a call at 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, my question is there a process between the recruiting and the actual hiring that they get vetted, that individually there is some question about their psychological well-being, not only their academic and educational requirements, but how do they think? Is there a problem there? And if you do hire them, is there a process by which they are reintegrated or reconstructed psychologically to enter into a community and to understand its dynamics?
Could I answer you?
Yeah.
When I go into some areas in Newport News and Norfolk, I lock my doors. I make sure I'm in the middle of the streets. I know that I'm in a dangerous area that can be threatened. And what do you think a police officer is getting into who's not even familiar with those areas?
Yeah, but
there's a sense of
work?
No. Oh, absolutely. I think people are very cognizant of the areas. I don't know, Roger may can speak. He's been involved in that a lot. I know I do.
Okay. All righty. I just want to read something really quickly. Governor McAuliffe, Governor of Virginia, has released a statement talking about the shooting, saying that he and his wife are heartbroken at the hateful act of what has gone on in Dallas, and calling for everyone that's going through some things to continue what they're doing with the protecting, as far as the police, protecting people. He talks about what went on in Louisiana and Minnesota, talking about the people who are mourning in wake of the recent tragedies, and saying it's not time to be divisive. And he's taking time to be thoughtful and for the courageous action of the police officers as well, and who are trying to protect the communities.
And I'll just say this real quickly. The Dallas Morning News, in an editorial just hours after the event, they pointed out, a lot of the police officers there last night were shielding and protecting some of the protesters who had been out there peacefully protesting.
Absolutely.
And so they had taken photos with some of the protesters before the incident took place.
Yes.
So, let's layer all this into it. It's tough to put caricatures out there sometimes. And, there were officers who were heroic last night in protecting some of the innocent bystanders who were there at the rally.
And also I want to point out that Dallas is also a city where they've had to go back, the DA, and overturn hundreds of convictions of black males because of wrongful and malicious prosecution by white prosecutors over the last 40 years. Okay, so Dallas has a history of this as well. It's in Texas, but it's a southern city. Mm-hmm. And again, I go back to these individuals. Hey, they're doing their job, okay? And if police departments are not saying we have to improve community relations, then they're simply just not doing what they should be doing at this point. Now, I'd also like to point out that in my role as counselor at law and as a counselor, I've had police officers, black police officers, come to me and talk to me about certain things. Some left the force because of the systematic racism that's in the force. If you're a black officer, even a white officer, trying to do the right thing. Okay, I mean they were ostracized, they were shut out, and so forth. So there are problems, and I've talked with police chiefs where they understand that they have these problems within their units as well. I mean, let's go back to New York. The only reason why we have the stop and frisk case that reached the Supreme Court is because that white police officer, who was a second generation officer, was taping for 17 months the briefings that were in the room where the chief was telling them, lock these black people up, frisk them, don't worry about it, we'll make us some charges, it doesn't matter. And he was locked out of his own system. He was barricaded in his own apartment and put into a quote-unquote mental facility because he had gone crazy. And even his father, who was a veteran, it took 3 days to find him. So again, hats off to everybody that does their job. Okay, we all do our jobs, but we cannot close a blind eye and make people feel good like it's roses, because this is a problem. I mean, we're all middle.
Wait.
Hold on one second, Bill. We're all at a point where we're at least 40 or older. But we've got individuals who are 20 and under or 25 and under. They're on the streets and they see this every single day and they endure it every day. And to them, it's just a different perspective.
I will. Let me say this and I'll let you go to your phone lines. Our police officers put their lives on the line. When I go to work, I put maybe 10 cents in my gas cup to go to work. These people put their lives and their families on the lines. And I'm going to stand up here for the police. There are some problems. But all in line, that thin blue line separates chaos from civilization in some of our communities. And these guys ought to be thanked, guys and ladies who are out there serving us each and every day with their very lives. And to find little nuances of issues to try to beat them down and make them seem as devils and stupid and ignorant and crazy, it's just not right. It's not right.
Bill, I don't think they're trying to do that to all the police forces.
They are. Oh, yes, I do.
I think this is for the few that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
But you're splattering it on all of them.
Tell that to Ahmadi's mother, whose son was shot 76 times.
Well, tell that to the 325,000 African Americans who have died on the streets, and the police have come to comfort them.
325,000 what?
20 years.
Let's take some calls. Okay, Corey's joining us from Norfolk.
You want to know where I got it from?
Corey, thank you for calling Another View.
Google it up.
Corey, you still there?
Hello.
Hi,
Hello?
Corey. Thank you for calling Another View.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks for accepting my call.
Okay, go right ahead.
I'm a black male, and I was in the Army, and I was in Afghanistan.
Okay.
When we had to do traffic stops, not knowing whether there was a bomb in the car or the guy had an AK-47, we had rules of engagement, ROEs, that we had to follow. And if we took it upon ourselves to feel threatened and just open fire on somebody over there and killed the person, we would have to go to jail as soldiers, putting our lives on the line. We would still have to go to jail and face the facts. And a lot of these officers are getting off and killing people, and it's just kind of ridiculous that they're doing that. And here it is that they have supposed one of the best trainings in America, and they're not implying that. And I have experience, not with every officer. There are good ones out there. I agree with the other gentlemen, but I have more often than not experienced. For instance, one time I left the club, I'm talking, and as I'm walking, I got an officer behind me. Keep moving. We're moving, and he's like, if y'all stop again, it took him 3 times. He said, if y'all stop again, and he got the mace right behind my left eye on the side of my head. He's like, I'm going to spray the whole crowd if y'all stop again. And I'm just sitting there flabbergasted, like, we're moving and we're trying to move, but we can only move with the crowd, and you're going to spray right next to my head. And you know how potent mace is. And with the other gentlemen, I also think that there needs to be more Big Brother programs for some of these young kids out here. Mm-hmm. I play ball with them. I see them in the basketball court, and they're sitting there, like boxing, you're getting ready to spar, and then they go from that to acting like they're pulling out a gun to shoot at each other. I just think that some of these kids need guidance, and at the same time, some of these communities need people to go out there and find out where the guns are coming from. Why is it that places like Chicago is called Chirac? and stuff like that is just continuing to happen across America, and it's kind of redundant. It's like, when is it going to stop? We're in 2016, for God's sake. I mean, when is it going to stop?
Thank you so much, Corey. We really appreciate that call. Will, are you still with us?
But thanks for your service.
Yeah,
sir.
I was, listening intently and, wanted to jump in. And I'm glad that that call is so important for us to listen to. To talk about what is wrong does not make it an automatic indictment on all of the police officers who are doing the right thing. So though Bill is saying that, and that is true, I said that in my statement. The audio you played of the police officer restates that. The more we keep going off track into that argument, we distract ourselves from what we need to focus on. And what we need to focus on is exactly what that caller said. He said, look, there are rules of engagement. The officers that are in place that do not operate according to the training are the ones that need to be rooted out, because we're going to continue to see these types of incidences. Our president had it absolutely right. He said that these are symptoms of America's overall problem sickness, right? So if you want to really eradicate the sickness, you have to properly diagnose what's going on, and then you have to address it with a meaningful solution. If we keep allowing ourselves to get distracted off of these arguments, we're never going to get to the solution. So, for example, we know that white-on-white crime is a problem. Hispanic on Hispanic crime is a problem, because, as Roger said on this show other times, most crimes happen within groups. They happen with people who are closest, you have most access to. So why is it that when a police officer, primarily a white police officer, and I've had bad encounters with black ones too, when a white police officer kills a black citizen, the question we always run to, we got a black-on-black crime problem. Well, we got a white-on-white crime problem. We got a Hispanic-on-Hispanic crime. Why are we not talking about that then? Stay focused on what the issue is. That's the only way we're going to eradicate it. And that brother that just spoke, the other police officer from Cleveland who spoke passionately about it, is telling us the police chief in Virginia Beach that I spent time with, that Roger spent time with, in Hampton and Newport News, 200 plus men had a forum. I moderated it. These guys get it. Those are the people who have the solutions, and they need the support, and we need the politicians to get on board to actually eradicate these problems that have historical roots. And not going to be eradicated overnight. But if you keep getting distracted over these other debates that are just distractions, it's just like the snipers killing the cops in Dallas. That is nowhere near the answer. And that's just going to be a distraction. Now we're talking about, well, the snipers and the cops ought to be protected. We need to join with the cops, the police officers who get it, who are passionate, who really want to protect and serve, and we need to support them and make it easier for them to do their jobs and root out the others who are frustrating them. That's what we need to do. Stay focused.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sure. Will brings up a very good point. We can't start victim blaming and raising one problem and saying it is the cause of this problem. Yes, we do know that drugs are an issue in communities of color. We do know that there are issues with broken homes in communities of color. But we can't say that because of these issues, it's making police act the way they're acting. That we cannot do that. Okay, if you do that, you're victim blaming, you're misplacing the burden of proof. All right, these are classical ways in logic and scientific method in order to diffuse or take away from the critical thinking and also the resolution finding of issues. The other point that he also brings up is that we have to make sure that we hold, again, I mean, you have elected officials in these areas, and he mentioned whether elected officials follow their lead. What are they doing on these issues? Okay, so that's another show for another day. And then again, I mean, there are individuals who do get it, but again, we have to focus on what the problem is. We can't say, oh, we have broken homes, these parents need to keep their kids do X, Y, Z. No. we're talking about once a person is in what we call custodial custody of police officers, they then have total control, and the entire responsibility is up on them in order to follow what the gentleman said, the rules of engagement. Now, once things kind of start to go haywire, that's open to interpretation. But now, what happens when you're in custodial custody? What happens at that point?
All righty, let's take some of these calls. Line 3, Jason from Norfolk. Jason, thank you for calling Another View.
Yeah, sure. Hi. As far as being pulled over or confronted by a police officer, last time I checked, I believe I'm correct, but it doesn't matter what race I am, I'm not required to say anything to that officer. Sometimes you feel the need to respond, say the wrong thing, you say too many things, and it just creates trouble. But it doesn't matter what race I am, I have no requirement to speak to that officer. If I feel like I've done something wrong, I still don't need to speak to that officer. And that's my right as a United States citizen.
Okay.
I think in
Jason.
Virginia,
Thank
you
for
have to
calling.
comply with the legal, whatever demand the officer make. Otherwise, you're doing something against the law. I believe that I hear all these arguments, and I hear all these things over and over again. And I'll go back to my good friend Roger, and I still got an article that he had published 25 years ago. I just think
it's
long ago, man. It's very good. I think there is a reason. My mom was very, very simple. She said, in order to wipe out the epidemic, you have to eliminate its source. And I think the source over all these other issues is the fact that we need to build better, stronger communities. And you can't blame it on the politicians. They're not going to do anything. You have to look at, I know one of the things Roger had said, he was raising his son, and it's you as well, and y'all taught them. I think we just need to fix our own communities. And then we try to get the most help we can. I know nobody wants to hear that. I think that my children, and they're doing well, it's with other people as well. But we always try to make sure that they instilled values and things in them, Roger, that meant some things. Now, for some reason, I think that's the undergirding issue with all of these things.
And I think that exacerbates the problem when you don't have enough of that mentoring, you don't have enough of good parenting. However, there also seems to be, I think some police officers, quite frankly, are fearful of white and black people when they stop them during police stops.
At night, I would be.
Or during the day. And the problem is, if you treat the example of one person who might be a criminal, what happens to all the other people who aren't criminals? And, and I think this was seen with the Stop and Frisk program in New York City. You had, yes, they did get some drugs, they did get some guns, but they also got a lot of people swept up into that who had done nothing wrong, and now they're going to hate police officers because they felt like, wait, where was my civil rights in this? Where was my due process in this? You had no reason to stop me, and yet now you've swept me up with everybody else, and I did nothing wrong. And so we have to be careful. And hopefully we have to dialogue with law enforcement. That would help, I think, go a long way into making conditions better for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah,
I
I agree with Roger. I think the last point you made is particularly important, this dialogue between the communities, a dialogue with the police department, for civic organizations, NAACP, Urban League, colleges, universities, secondary schools, to come together and say, okay, we do have a problem. Now, let's get together and find out a solution. And then let that be the precedent for establishing what police would do in certain situations.
Okay, let's take another call. Renee from Newport News. Renee, thank you for holding so long. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you all very much. Enjoying the dialogue. And my heart goes out absolutely to the families of both those who were shot and killed, a young man earlier in the week, and to the police officers in Dallas yesterday. My points have been made by most of you. My concern is that when it comes to the police officers, we have bad police officers. That's what this is all about. Those police officers who are not upholding their not upholding their requirements as service people to our community. That's what this is all about. The good police officers, we recognize those, we see them, we know what they're doing. So what is happening is those persons who are now policing our society, they have systemic cultural behaviors that they have brought into their place of employment, i.e. police officers, and their prejudices, their racist behaviors and upbringing, and they're bringing it to the streets. They're bringing it to their job, and thus they are taking it out on Black people, for those who are racist, the ones who are racist.
Renee,
yes, ma'am.
Do you have any suggestions on how we weed out those bad officers?
There has to be, in the very beginning, much like any other job that you apply for, there has to be a system in place where you determine whether this job is the right fit for you. Psychological testing. There has to be assessments of sorts that relate to the environments that you're going to be working in. There are, and that's just a start. There are measures to determine whether someone is the right fit. You know, persons who apply for a job as any other position, there are certain criteria that you have to go through before you even are afforded the opportunity of the job.
Roger.
And one other thing, I believe his name is Mr. Thomas. I'm a bit taken aback by your flippant behavior, sir, with all due respect, towards our own people, as if we are the ones inciting and causing the issues within society. And we're not the only ones.
I didn't say that.
Just like, no, you're not saying that, but you are saying it in certain ways, as well as your behavior. And I think that is quite appalling, and it's wrong to have that type of demeanor towards a race of people who have been oppressed and are finding ways and developing ways, and are, yes, we have come a long way, but then there's a long way we have to go as well.
Thank you so much,
you all.
Renee. I appreciate your call.
Roger, one quick point. What is the average pay of a police officer? If you know.
I don't know it exactly, but in looking at some of the databases from recent years of the local police officers, starting police officers, I believe get sometimes around $35,000 to $40,000.
Are you kidding me?
I am not kidding you, and that is part of the issue. Now, obviously, you don't necessarily do it for pay, but we're talking about a great burden for not the commensurate pay all the time. And to one point, there is a process. Just because you get to the academy, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get through the academy. And you're going to have to go through a battery of tests, physical, psychological, to get through the process. Now, I'm not exactly sure what all of that entails, but there is a certain percentage who are accepted into the academy but don't necessarily make it all the way through. So there is some weeding out at that initial stage.
Okay, we've only really got about 4 more minutes left, and I would like to give each of you an opportunity to address this issue and come up with your final thoughts about. I know we can't solve this whole issue in an hour, but I would like for you to share your thoughts on how what we can do, at least in our own little part, to try and fix this issue. Eric.
Sure. All right, 1 minute. Again, our hearts go out to those that lost their family members and in these tragedies. But again, this is a symptom of the innate and systematic racism that America has yet to deal with. Why? And listen, this goes back to my theory of how to solve racism. When white males that have white privilege stand up against those that come to create divisions in systems, whether it be employment, whether it be in the corporate office, whether it be in your churches, wherever they may be, you have to stand up and speak up against that. The same way Martin Luther King did and lost his life. The same way Rosa Parks did. The same way Medgar Evers did and lost his life. You have to be able to stand and say, listen, we've made mistakes. Our fathers made mistakes. We benefited from these mistakes. Now it's time to stop and embrace what we need, and that's one country.
Okay, all righty. Bill, final thoughts?
Out of 100 white people I know maybe one that's probably would be a racist. The other 99 that I've known are good, decent people. I think it's a change in generations. I think what we need to do, and I am black, whoever the caller is, I'm an African American. I think we need to get our act together. I think we ought to provide strong leadership with mentorships and guys getting along with ladies and marrying them if they can, or doing something to raise strong families. I'm sick and tired of all these excuses, or blaming the police, guns. We're blaming everything but looking in the mirror and sometimes saying, what's wrong with us? We need to get our act together, and then we need to unite and go forward. It's not going to ever get any better until that happens, in my judgment.
Okay. Carol?
Well, I do agree with you in one extent, and that is in getting our act together, the only way we can do it is to talk about, identify problems, talk about it. And from my small perspective, I do invite members of the police department to come to my classes in political science to talk to young men and young ladies about what we need in the community and how to achieve them. And I think sometimes it starts with the small steps and then builds from there.
I want to ask you something before I go over to
Okay.
Roger, because we do have a few minutes left. Has that worked? I mean, have the kids, your students,
Oh, they have been very engaged and very excited that people would come and talk. In fact, one quick example, we had a young police officer that came to my office, and I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And he said, calm down. I'm just here because I heard that you had an open classroom on Friday to come and talk. Could I come? And I said, yes. And so it was very engaging. And I think very small steps to talk about what to do and
That's
what
two
not to
good
do.
white officers that you know now.
Okay.
One that help you?
Roger.
In class.
Okay.
We all know that, and in so many shows that we've talked about previously, some of the very grievous issues that are involving African Americans nationwide. What makes this issue of police killing African Americans so critical is we know that the equation is police officers have so much more power, so much more control on the streets, and oftentimes with very little fear of sanction. And that's why this one is so, it galvanizes African Americans so much. I think in some ways it does distract from some of the things that we have to do in our own communities. But I think when you see these videos, you see some of the issues and some of the problems that that we as a people fear when we come into contact with police officers.
Okay, Will, you got about 10 seconds.
Sorry, Will.
Hey, quickly, the gentleman in Minnesota that got shot and killed, he did have his act together. Okay, he was a supervisor. He was working, and there was a 4-year-old child in the car. Okay, so we need to stay focused on the specific problems. And this past weekend, for July 4th, I saw a movie, Free State of Jones. I would advise anybody to go see that movie if you want to understand what's really going on. And don't get caught up in the main character. See his cause, see the dynamics, and you're going to see the same things going on then, going on now.
All righty.
All right.
Thank you so much, Will. I'm sorry, we are out of time. Next week on Another View, this has been a dynamic conversation, and I want to thank all of you. Next week on Another View, Barbara will be back, and she'll be talking to Suzanne Johnson-Cook about her book, Soul Sisters. Our theme music was composed by Jay Sennett. Danny Epperson filled in for me as producer. Todd Washburn was our audio engineer. And Chantel Davis answered our phones. Stay safe, everyone, so we can get together again next week for Another View.